Murshid Hazrat Khaja Qudsi Shah Chisti Qadri Naqshbandi Sahrawardi Sanusi Irshaadul wa Khalifa Salasil Arba'in Qaddasallahu Sirrahul Aziz. Preface Maktubate Habeeb. Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamu ala ibadihi latina istafa. This collection of letters, which crawls in the hands of the readers, is a collection of letters written by Qutbedu Alam Hazrat Khaja Habibullah Shah Qaddasallahu Sirrahul. This is a new addition to the literature of letters. Reading these letters brings back the memories of the accomplished and glorious greats of our forefathers. They had left their permanent mark on the world stage. The size of this collection is certainly less than other collections of letters. The number of his disciples is said to be 1.5 or 2 lakhs. That means about 150,000 to 200,000. They included all types of people, commoners and professionals, learned and illiterate, and everyone in between. It is not known how many letters they wrote in their early and middle periods. Most likely they have all been damaged. If they had been preserved, one starts to wonder how many heavier sections this collection of letters would have evolved into. In the last period, in accordance to some disciples' requests, only a few important letters were preserved. Copies of a few other letters were also saved. The same is true of the ecstasies obtained from their spiritual councils. That is, very few of those who took the lead or achieved it are still alive. Apart from them, no one in future generations will know how many corpses the life-giving breath of his spiritual counsel brought back to life. How many patients drank the nectar of true health and obtained perfect health or healing. Then he had a short 2-sentence verse poem. His connection can revive even the dead, and there is no death after the resurrection. And then he continues. Apart from that, all the remaining letters are considered very sacred, and I present it to you as a letter that can change your heart. Hazrat Qibla Qutbedu Alam was born in the early 20th century in the city of South Arcot, Tamil Nadu. His death occurred in Singapore, 31 October 1971, at the approximate age of 72. To the great sages who preserved and practiced the religious ways of those before them, he was the best of example. That means he was an example to the rest of them as well. He had a body that shone like that of an angel, and it shone through the clothes that covered his body. This is what Murshid was trying to explain to all of us earlier. As a sage and a close friend of God, and as a completed person, his contact with myself, a simple or lowly man, that means he's referring to himself, Qudsi Shah, happened in 1967. At that time, I was 42 years old and he was 68. The source or capital or main point of this simple man's life, that means he's referring to himself, point of this simple man's entire life was only during that time I spent with him for 3 consecutive years in his service. Which means what I'm trying to say is, if I've interpreted it correctly, throughout his whole life, the main point was only that 3 years that he spent with Murshid. After that, my life period was unqualified to be noted. Only after the contact with him did my eyes see the light. Only after that did my realization start. Nothing had been exaggerated about events that had been reported to have happened to people like Hazrat Hawzul Azam Rahmatullahi Alayhi, Hazrat Khaja Gharib Nawaz Rahmatullahi Alayhi, Hazrat Nizamuddin Awliya Rahmatullahi Alayhi, Hazrat Khaja Banda Nawaz, and to all the other great saints. That means it became manifest. I think he understood the significance of all the events that has been reported to him only after meeting Murshid. So he knows that it is true and the depth of which. So if I've interpreted correctly, this is what he means. Right? The inspirational quotes of those great men were not only before the eyes, but also imprinted in the heart. 200,000 aspirants received initiation in his presence through his hands. Among them were not only the learned and great men of the highest rank, but also the uneducated common man. For the learned scholars, he was a powerful wisdom. In the matter of the general public, he was a wise saint guru. That means he dispensed his speech according to the level of the people that are. There's no one that is very, very high. As high as you are, he will also adhere to that as well. So if I've interpreted correctly. He had not studied Darsay of Nizami, but when he reached a state of ecstasy or hal, he would address the scholars and ulama to solve the most profound or complicated and delicate problems of the seminary using simple words and simplistic terms. Even the longest explanation will be transformed into brief but very clear explanations for the matter. He had received worldly knowledge, yani dunyawi or secular education, in a simple English government school. However, people like Maulana Muhammad Ismail Rahmatullahi Alayh, Shaykhul Hadith Rahmatullahi Alayh, and Allama Shakir Naidi Rahmatullahi Alayh would sit down by the knees before him, bowing their heads. It is not known how many treasures of his letters have been lost in vain. Shaykhul Hadith Maulana Muhammad Ismail Rahmatullahi Alayh probably received initiation from him in 1947 or 48, and Maulana Shakir Naidi Rahmatullahi Alayh in 1949 or 50. Both these great men were of the same age or older than Hazrat. Shaykhul Hadith died before him in 1963, and Maulana Shakir Naidi's death was in 1966. In between, they were connected via letters regarding spiritual issues to Hazrat and had received their respective answers from him via reply letters. Realizing the importance of those letters, they kept the letters safely. They also noted down the Sejarah of Hazrat Qibla Rahmatullahi Alayh and published it together with a collection of the answers to the letters they sent, along with some other letters they had sent. After the demise of those two great leaders, hundreds of letters written by other disciples were sent without being preserved and so were lost without a trace. If all their letters had been preserved or saved, they would have been a treasure of great value as a literature of letters. Towards Hazrat's last holy days, for 3 years, this servant, that means himself, Hazrat Qudsi San, had many opportunities to read and to teach Khanqa Sharif. During that time, the replies of Hazrat's letter were written by this servant. That means he would dictate and he would write down. Sometimes word for word, sometimes in the form of an article or prose. Realizing the importance of those replies, this servant began to collect copies of them. 3 months before his death, when he was embarking on a trip to Singapore, he also presented me, together with Salasil Arba'in, the collection of his copied letters and its format. Salasil Arba'in was published a few months after his death. It is only after almost 20 years that these letters were published in Urdu. This collection also includes letters that were published in conjunction with the Sajras around 1960. Although the number of these letters is not large, the amount of spiritual and true wisdom that readers gain from them will satisfy or have completed their search. With this, even the general reader will understand that the reality of spirituality has not yet been destroyed. So which means if you read these letters, you will know that the spirituality is not dead. It is actually still alive. You will realize this when you read the letters. I had goosebumps when I was trying to translate the first letter. The knowledge of the divine secret will not be obtained or achieved by all spiritualists in the path. It is a great thing to accept this truth, but it is also currently a great test to face those who argue true wisdom and reject it. So he had similar problems that Murshid is also facing. So his advice is this: at least superficially accept spirituality. He will explain why. There is nothing wrong with that. Even today, some devotees are sitting in a corner somewhere, understanding the advantages and are benefiting or even achieved fulfillment just by following through. They will look at this Maktubat Habeeb and think about what it means. Al-imanu dhallatul mu'min, meaning faith is the lost thing of a mu'min, a believer. He will take it wherever he finds it. The unique characteristics and talents of the greats are clearly visible between the lines of the letters that they had crafted. Various elders and their letters show unique marks according to their merits. It seems necessary to mention an incident here as an example of the skill and finesse of our Hazrat Qibla Hazrat Qutbidu Alam Rahmatullahi alayhi in crafting his reply letters. Once in Kanta Sharif, in the company of Hazrat Qibla Rahmatullahi alayhi, as a servant of his, I raised the question, Hazrat, our connection is with the Chisti Nizami, but what we are practicing or implementing is with the Naqshbandi connection. Why is that? Hazrat replied, it is true our connection is with the Chisti Nizami. It is also true that our Murshid Qibla, Hazrat Haja Arifullah Shah Qaddasallahu Sirrahul Aziz, also followed the Naqshbandi process and taught the same to his disciples. That is why the attachment unique to Chistiya Sheikh and the Murakaba and self-denial of the Naqshbandiya, the sum of the two, is practiced as the closest means of intimacy for the encounter with God. It can also be said that the beginning of Naqshbandiya and the end of other orders methods are the same. So you have an explanation for this?
I've said this in the in the intensives, right? So if you look at our worship, his Silsila book, there's the zikr called the Chishtiya Sabri. Okay? So that is the Chishti zikr, where it is done audibly loud. Traditionally, it is supposed to be very loud, to the point that if you read in Suluk al-Habeeb, until the body absorbs the zikr. So this is the way of, the general way of Sayyidina Ali, which is also the way of Qadriya and Suhrawardiya. But it is, how do I say this? It is even more sharper in the Chishtiya way. It is more, it is not just loud, but it is sharply loud. Right? There's a slight frequency of the voice that when you do the dhikr, it enters, it penetrates really deeply. So that's why it's quite fiery. And then, so with this, then the heart goes into a state of qalbi dhikr, wukuf. Now, in the Naqshbandi method, they go the other way around, which is they start with wukuf qalbi. That means they sit down and then they make the internal self engaged in dhikr, as opposed to the external self engaged in dhikr. So this is where, so if you are, and traditionally, way back in the Silsila, the Khajigans, this is the way. So before Naqshbandi became internal zikr first, they share the same method with the Chishtis, Yusaviya, and what we call the Khajigans. The Khajigans zikr was audibly loud, very loud, from Uzbek, Tagajis Khan. So the Silsila came from, of course, An-Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It traveled, that's why you went to Chisht. When here, when that region, Afghan, etc., the zikr was audibly loud, as we've mentioned that even when Khaja Muinuddin Chishti does zikr, the wall would burst. Literally the wall would break. That's why when he does his chilla in Ajmer, the walls were like what Pir Maisha was saying yesterday, right? It became droplets because of the intensity of the zikr. Now the Naqshis achieved that, but with the internal method, Dalam. And that started with Sheikh Bahauddin Naqshband. Before, prior to him, they shared the same methods with the Chishtiya. And that method then went with Khaja Muinuddin, entered into India. And then it went, the Naqshbandi method went into India again through Sheikh Mujaddid Al-Fithani. But the part where it became kind of separated is because one believed in Sema, which is Tasmir, the listening of Qawali or call, the sayings that brought them into ecstasy, where else the Naqshis don't believe in them. They don't believe in Qawali. And so there's no music. And this is where it became separated again. And so that's why Khaja Qudsi Shah is asking, because now you see a distinct order. The Chishti, Nizami, Sabri as a distinct order as from the Naqshi. But why again this is highlighted? Because then Khaja Habibullah Shah understands and has gone through all these methods. So he is able to dispense this and his will up to the God. So for some, it's following the temperament, not the order anymore. So if this murid, his temperament is good for wukuf qalbi, give him qalbi. If this, but you see, this is the beautiful thing about Khaja Habibullah Shah, you cannot pen him down. He is a kutub, right? What is the definition of kutub? A pole that holds the canopy. In Arabic, kutub means a pole. But what does it hold? It holds a canopy. So Khaja Habibullah Shah is the pole that holds all the 45 silsilas. So he can give whoever is under the canopy, is up to him. He decides in his wilayat, okay, the zikr is good for you, you do this lawak, you do that. That's why Khaja Qudsi Shah is asking, yeah, but our silsila. So he's seeing it from that perspective. Khaja Habibullah Shah says, no, we give. So where the Naqshi end? Start where the other begin, right?
Yes.
So that's the slogan of Naqshbandi. The Shuyukh always says this, where we start is where the other tariqas end. It's true in a sense, but yes and no, because after that everybody meets in Fasul and Fas, which is the zikr of the breath, zikr of seal, and then they develop into what Khaja Habibullah Shah wants is the outcome is mushahada. So mushahada is a state of witnessing. Later you see this in the letters, I believe, am I right? Yeah, so you will see this. So that's a technicality. For us, what do? We just follow what Rashid has to do. That's the easiest. But since he's asking, I'm just explaining for you. Inshallah, Allah knows best. I'm sure there's some mistakes in there.
Thank you, Moshe. Like what he said, it is because of this harmony of distinctive features that it is famously known. Chishtiya and Naqshbandiya are akin to being brotherly to each other.
Yes.
And Qadiriya and Sahrawardiya are brotherly to each other as well. So this is something new that I learned as well. Pay attention and cast your eyes to these verses or letters of Hazrat Qibla, rahmatullahi alayhi. You will feel in your hearts, here and there, the same subtle tone of attachment and self-abnegation that swells from the beginning to the end. This quality is what makes his verses stand out from the verses of other great people and poets. Your servant, Khaja Qudsi Shah Chishti al-Qadri, Ismail Rafi Umri.
Fatiha.